Hi, I'm movie man Eric Houston, and I'm watching every movie ever made. And if I'm going to watch every movie ever made, that means that once in a while, I have to watch something like Star Trek Section 31.
31 is a Black Ops division. Spy work.
It's just a place for people to bend the rules.
Starfleet is here to make sure no one commits murder.
A movie that pushes the limits of what we can consider a movie more than just about anything else. And this is coming from a guy who's more than happy to consider a crummy cable TV Christmas movie as a movie. But this, Section 31, so here's the thing. I'm a longtime Star Trek fan. I love Star Trek, and one of the big ways I got into Star Trek was through the movies. So if there's a movie series that's sacred to me, Star Trek is certainly among them. And that doesn't say that every Star Trek movie is good or that even most of them are good.
Excuse me, I'd just like to ask a question. What does God need with a starship?
There's a couple of great ones. There's a couple of pretty good ones. There's a couple of real stinkers. Star Trek Section 31 is worse than any of them by a country mile. And it's aggravating that the folks at Paramount decided to classify this as a movie. I think they sent it to the MPAA. They got it rated and everything. This is very clearly a failed pilot. A pilot for a TV series that's not going to go anywhere. It stars Michelle Yeoh, who is always great. And immediately the plot is so complicated, especially if you're coming into it cold, that it is unbelievable. So I'm going to do my best to try and tell you what is going on in this crummy movie. All right, stay with me. So Michelle Yeoh plays a character who debuted in the TV series Star Trek Discovery, which was already not my favorite Star Trek show. In that show, she plays Captain Philippa Georgiou, a Starfleet captain who dies fairly early on. Then later in the season, we meet the Mirror Universe, or for those of you who aren't dedicated to Star Trek lore, the parallel reality evil version of Philippa Georgiou, who's the Empress of the Mirror Universe, or what they call the Terran Empire. And then she bedevils our heroes for a while before eventually being exiled into our universe and becoming a frenemy of the characters and being a recurring character on the show, causing mischief, but mostly helping people. So at some point, they decided, well, here's what we're going to do with Michelle Yeoh. We're going to spin her off into her own show where she is essentially in the Space CIA, Section 31. Now, I am going to try really hard not to freak out too much at you about Star Trek stuff, and that's going to be difficult for me to do because I think about Star Trek a lot. Section 31 is a concept that comes out of the show Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and in Deep Space Nine, the way Section 31 is presented is that it is a guy. Dr. Bashir, the doctor on that show, meets this guy who claims to be from Section 31, a super secretive section inside of Starfleet. But nobody in Starfleet has ever heard of Section 31, so there's a lot of ambiguity about, well, is there a weird clandestine CIA? Or is it just this one guy and he's kind of crazy and manipulating things for his own purposes?
You're saying I'm a Dominion spy and don't even know it.
What could be more perfect? There's no chance of you getting caught because you don't even realize you're working for them. When they want to debrief you, all they do is trigger your memory.
That's ridiculous.
And the show kind of, in my opinion anyway, tends to lean toward, there's not really a Section 31. It's just this one guy. New Star Trek, though, Discovery and now this thing have leaned way into, oh yeah, there's a Section 31, and they are the greatest, most badass people on the planet. And that is dumb and stupid and things we've seen before. And ultimately, that is how I would describe this movie. It is dumb and stupid, and it's things we've seen before. The plot is nonsensical and difficult to follow. The movie starts with a flashback showing Michelle Yeoh's character murdering her whole family as a part of the process of becoming Empress of the Terran Empire. And now we're supposed to be rooting for her because in present day, our universe, the Federation or whatever, she's decided she has some regrets. Even though all of the characters throughout the movie are like, now this lady, she will kill us at any moment. I don't know, man. I found it difficult to deal with. She, of course, ends up teaming up with a ragtag group of Section 31 dudes, and they need to stop a plot. There's a super weapon involved. A super weapon that, as it turns out, is from the Mirror Universe, and Michelle Yeoh ordered it to be built, but it was so terrible that she said it should be destroyed, and now she has to destroy it again. But I guess they tell us at some point what the thing does, but I couldn't follow it. So the stakes are really nebulous throughout this whole thing. And then a lot of characters get killed. A lot of characters double cross other characters. A huge portion of the movie takes place in a dreary, I don't know, it's not even like a mining colony. It's some kind of planetary antenna station. And they just kill a lot of time hanging around there. It bad. Let's talk about the other characters in this thing, because ultimately a Star Trek show is going to live or die by its ensemble, and with a couple of exceptions, this ensemble is pretty bad. There's the guy who's in charge of the unit. I don't know his name. I don't know the actor's name, but we find out that he's kind of one of the genetic supermen, like Khan is from the 1990s, who was in like hibernation until fairly recently, but he wasn't one of Khan's guys. He worked for one of the other genetic supermen that took over the world at that time. But also, he's not a genetic superman. He's a regular guy that then they put some super genetic juice into for some reason. I don't know. He was dumb, uncharismatic, uninteresting. Leave him alone. There's a Delton lady. The Deltons are the bald folks from Star Trek The Motion Picture. They kill her right away. Sorry to tell you. There's a guy who wears a big armored suit. He is ironically one of the guys from Pacific Rim, the guy who's Hercules' son, who has to go into the robot with Idris Elba at the end of that movie, which is a great movie. His character is stupid. And less said about him, the better. Then there is Rachel Garrett. Now, if you're a deep Star Trek fan like I am, you instantly recognize Rachel Garrett as the captain of the Enterprise C from the classic Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise.
We were answering the distress signal.
Distress signal?
You must have heard it. From the Klingon outpost. Narendra 3.
And then you're like, what do I know about Rachel Garrett? And the answer is not a lot. She's not in that episode a ton. She's not the focus of it. She's fine or whatever, but she's not some storied Star Trek character like Uhura or something. She's just she's just a essentially generic Starfleet captain. Well, in this is about when she was younger and hanging around with Section 31. Why? And this is the thing. Why about her? Why about the guy who I guess maybe knew a person who knew Khan? We've seen all this before. Create new aliens. Create new situations. Instead, what this has done is it's just mining the past, strip mining the past in uninteresting ways. And we've seen it before, which is not what Star Trek is about. And because of that, this movie felt to me way more like fan fiction than it did like something new and or interesting. A couple other characters. There's Quasi is his name. He's a Kamaloid, which is another thing pulled from a thing, because that's the kind of alien Iman is in Star Trek VI. He's a shapeshifter. He's played by Sam Richardson, who you might know from, I Think You Should Leave. Best part of the show. Best part of the whole movie, Sam Richardson, his energy, his charisma isn't really dampened by the dumb script. He does a good job of selling it, but, he doesn't really have anything to work with. But it was still fun seeing him here, and I hope he had fun getting to make his Star Trek. Then the last character is this guy. His name is, I think, Fuzz. Fuzz is introduced to us as a dopey, laughing Irish Vulcan, but it turns out that the Vulcan is just a big robot that a little itty-bitty microscopic alien dude is flying around. Think the guy inside of the head in Men in Black, or they did this as well in Doctor Who, or that movie Meet Dave, where essentially a body is a spaceship and there's a guy driving it. Now, there's a whole central mystery to this episode, at least in the antenna portion of it. A who betrayed the group mystery. And I'm not saying it was Fuzz. But it's very clear early on to anybody who's been paying even a little bit of attention, which is difficult to do with this movie, that obviously it was Fuzz. He's obviously the traitor. This is obviously what's going on. But all these super smart Starfleet types and the Empress of the Mirror Universe can't figure that out, which is a problem. Another problem, and this is a dorky thing that's not going to matter to most people, the character of Fuzz breaks Star Trek. This show, I haven't really talked about this, is meant to be set before the adventures of Captain Kirk and crew. But it features a lot of technology that is way more advanced than anything from that show, i.e., a perfect-looking robot that can walk around and be piloted by a microscopic eye from the inside. If these things, these little guys, were part of the Star Trek universe the whole time, that's a problem. They are an almost unstoppable threat. At one point, Fuzz says that he has 190,000 children waiting to hatch. 190,000 of these things, and in the movie, it is very blatant that Fuzz's whole deal is he can go inside of machines and wreck them. These guys could destroy the Federation like that. If any of them thought about it for a half a second, and that's a problem. You cannot introduce a species, a threat, whatever, into your show that is so much more ridiculously powerful and capable than anything else you have, because it wrecks the whole thing. It's really dumb and short-sighted. And again, something we've seen before. Not in Star Trek, granted, I guess, but in tons of other sci-fi. And that's disappointing. Star Trek is supposed to be about discovering the new, and this is not that. The movie also looks like absolute garbage. The costumes are bad. The production design is bad. And the whole thing looks super, super cheap. Again, I think I said this at the beginning. If I didn't, I'm saying it now. This is an embarrassment. And I would hope that everyone involved in the production is embarrassed by how atrocious this thing is, even by the standards of a failed TV pilot. If we live in a world where HBO or Warner Brothers won't release a Batgirl movie, then we also live in a world where CBS should have known well enough to just not release this thing. And I know they went, well, we've got Michelle Yeoh. She's an Academy Award winner, so we should release the thing that she made before she became too expensive for us to make a whole TV show with her. Well, I don't know, guys. I don't think you should have done it, because this is maybe the worst Star Trek thing in the history of Star Trek. Even worse than that time that Tom Paris and Catherine Janeway turned into slugs because they went too fast in a spaceship. Star Trek Section 31, 1 star.